Winter had settled over the kingdom with relentless determination. Snow-blanketed rooftops buried narrow pathways and turned the countryside into a vast expanse of white. While wealthy families warmed themselves beside roaring fireplaces, many villagers struggled to survive another freezing season. Among them was 22-year-old, a young woman whose life had never been touched by privilege. Every morning before sunrise, she crossed the snow-covered streets to work at the village bakery. Her boots were worn, her coat had been patched countless times, and the cold often found its way through the seams. Yet she never complained. Long before customers arrived, she was kneading dough, tending ovens, and preparing bread that would feed much of the village. Most people saw only an ordinary girl with plain features and simple clothing. They noticed neither the quiet determination in her eyes nor the strength hidden beneath her gentle demeanor. Since her father's death 3 years earlier had become the sole support of her aging mother. The burden was heavy, but she carried it with remarkable grace. What few people knew was that she regularly set aside part of her modest earnings to help others. When an elderly widow could not afford bread, found a way to leave a loaf at her doorstep. When hungry children wandered near the bakery, she slipped pastries into their hands with a smile. She never sought recognition. Their gratitude was enough. One particularly cold evening, a young boy approached the bakery after closing. His cheeks were red from the wind and his hands trembled from hunger. Noticed him lingering outside and invited him in. Without hesitation, she wrapped several pieces of fresh bread and gave them to him. "You should keep this for yourself," the boy said softly. Smiled. "If I keep it, only one person eats tonight. If you take it home, your whole family can." The boy's eyes filled with tears before he hurried away into the falling snow. Acts like these had become ordinary parts of her life. Yet despite her kindness, few regarded her as someone remarkable. In a world that admired wealth and status, goodness rarely attracted attention. Far from the village stood the grand estate of Duke James, one of the kingdom's most powerful nobles. At 26, he possessed everything many men desired: influence, wealth, intelligence, and a title respected throughout the realm. Yet he was known by another name as well. People called him the Cold Duke. Years earlier, James had entered public service in the capital, where ambition and deception flourished behind elegant smiles. Betrayals from trusted allies had taught him painful lessons. Promises had been broken, loyalties had been bought. By the time he returned to oversee his estate, warmth had vanished from much of his personality. His servants respected him. His peers feared him. Few genuinely knew him. James viewed most interactions as transactions. Every compliment seemed calculated. Every friendship appeared conditional. He trusted almost no one. When news spread that the Duke would host a winter charity gala to raise support for struggling villages, excitement swept through the region. Nobles from neighboring territories prepared elaborate gowns and expensive gifts. Merchants hoped to gain valuable connections. Even common villagers were invited to contribute food and supplies. The bakery owner volunteered several baskets of fresh bread and asked to deliver them personally to the estate. She accepted without hesitation. The evening of the gala arrived beneath a sky filled with drifting snowflakes. The Duke's mansion glowed with golden light, creating a striking contrast against the darkness outside. Carriages lined the entrance while elegantly dressed guests filled the grand ballroom. Felt out of place the moment she stepped inside. Her dress was neat but simple. Compared to the luxurious silks surrounding her, it seemed painfully modest. Several glanced in her direction before quickly dismissing her. Ignoring the whispers, she focused on her task. The ballroom dazzled with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and towering decorations fashioned from winter roses. Music drifted through the air while servants moved gracefully among the guests. For a brief moment, allowed herself to admire the beauty of the scene. Then she saw Duke James. Standing near the center of the ballroom, he commanded attention without making any effort to seek it. His dark formal attire complemented his tall frame, and his expression remained unreadable as he conversed with local officials. Understood immediately why people found him intimidating. There was a distance in his eyes that seemed impossible to cross. As she carried a tray toward one of the service tables, a group blocked her path. Their conversation paused as they examined her appearance. One of them smiled thinly. "How brave," she remarked, "attending a gala dressed like that." Soft laughter followed, lowered her gaze and continued walking. She had learned long ago that dignity often meant refusing to engage with cruelty. Unfortunately, fate had one more humiliation waiting. As she moved through the crowded ballroom, a guest stepped backward unexpectedly, tried to avoid him, but her foot caught against the edge of a carpet. The tray shifted violently, a teacup tipped over. Tea splashed across the floor near Duke James. The music continued, but nearby conversations abruptly stopped. Every eye turned toward her. Embarrassment flooded through's chest. "I apologize," she said quickly. Before she could kneel to clean the spill, James looked at her with unmistakable disapproval. His voice was calm, yet sharp enough to cut through the room. "You're just an ordinary plain girl, know your place." Silence followed. The words struck harder than any shouted insult. Around them, several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances while others smirked openly. Felt her cheeks burn. For one painful moment, she feared tears might betray her. But she refused to give anyone that satisfaction. Instead, she straightened her posture and met James's gaze. Neither anger nor hatred appeared in her eyes. Only disappointment. Without another word, she cleaned the spill, placed the tray aside, and quietly left the ballroom. Outside, snow drifted gently from the dark sky. The cold air stung her face, but it felt easier to endure than the humiliation she carried inside. She walked home alone through the silent streets, replaying the moment again and again. By the time she reached her small house, a painful realization had settled in her heart. The Duke had judged her without knowing anything about her. To him, she was merely another insignificant face among countless others. That night stood beside her window and watched snowflakes disappear into the darkness. Then she made herself a promise. One day, people would see more than her appearance. One day, they would recognize her worth. As the winter wind whispered beyond the glass, an opportunity destined to change her future was already moving quietly toward the village, though neither nor the Duke yet realized how profoundly their lives would soon begin to change. The morning after the charity gala awoke with the Duke's words still echoing in her mind. The humiliation remained painful, yet beneath the hurt a new determination had taken root. She understood that dwelling on the insult would accomplish nothing. If her future was going to change, she would have to change it herself. A week later, opportunity arrived in a form she never expected. A traveling educational foundation visited the village seeking promising young people from humble backgrounds. The organization offered advanced training in administration, architecture, commerce, and public planning. Candidates were required to demonstrate intelligence, discipline, and practical problem-solving skills. Applied quietly, she expected little. To her surprise, she earned one of the highest evaluation scores. When the acceptance letter arrived, she stared at it for several minutes before believing it was real. Leaving home frightened her, but remaining where she was frightened her more. With her mother's encouragement and the support of grateful villagers, she departed the only life she had ever known. The first months were difficult. Many students came from influential families and possessed years of formal education, often felt behind. She studied long after others slept. She reviewed lessons repeatedly. She made mistakes and endured moments of self-doubt. Whenever discouragement threatened to overwhelm her, she remembered the ballroom. She remembered being dismissed as ordinary. Instead of weakening her resolve, the memory sharpened it. Gradually, her efforts began producing results. Her instructors noticed her unusual ability to understand practical problems affecting rural communities. Unlike many students who focused solely on theory, understood what poverty felt like. She knew how a failed harvest affected families. She understood why villages struggled during severe winters. Her projects consistently reflected real needs rather than abstract ideals. By the end of her first year, she ranked among the academy's most respected students. Years passed. Seasons changed. Winter surrendered to spring, spring to summer, and summer to autumn before snow once again covered the land. Then the cycle repeated. During that time, transformed into someone remarkable. She became known for designing affordable storage systems that protected food supplies during harsh weather. She helped merchants create more efficient trade routes between isolated communities. She advised local councils on infrastructure projects that improved transportation and reduced costs. Each success strengthened her reputation. Yet despite growing recognition, she remained the same person at heart. Whenever she received payment for consulting work, she allocated part of it toward charitable initiatives. Villages that once struggled to survive winter began receiving practical assistance. Food distribution improved, shelters expanded, families experienced stability that had previously seemed impossible. People admired her not only because she was capable, but because she genuinely cared. Meanwhile, life within Duke James's estate followed a very different course. Initially, he paid little attention to the memory of the bakery girl. His responsibilities consumed most of his attention. Political disputes demanded constant management. Commercial partnerships required negotiation. Agricultural production fluctuated unpredictably due to changing weather patterns. As the years progressed, new difficulties emerged. Several advisors whom James trusted began exploiting weaknesses within his administration. Funds disappeared through concealed corruption. Business agreements that appeared profitable produced disappointing results. Projects failed despite substantial investments. Each setback reinforced his skepticism toward others. His estate remained wealthy, but maintaining its prosperity required increasing effort. The burden grew heavier. The isolation grew deeper. Although surrounded by servants and officials, James often found himself alone. One evening, while reviewing financial reports, he overheard two employees discussing a charitable initiative transforming nearby villages. The name responsible for those improvements caught his attention. At first, he assumed it was another person. Yet curiosity lingered. Over the following months, her name appeared repeatedly. Merchants praised her planning strategies. Village leaders credited her guidance for improving local economies. Travelers spoke of her accomplishments with genuine admiration. The reports conflicted sharply with the image he remembered. Eventually, James began asking questions. What he learned unsettled him. He discovered that before attending the gala years earlier, had already been helping struggling families despite her own financial hardship. He learned about the bread she regularly provided to hungry children. He heard stories from elderly villagers who credited her kindness with helping them survive difficult winters. Not a single account portrayed her as selfish or ambitious. Every story revealed generosity. Every story revealed character. For the first time, James reconsidered the encounter that had once seemed insignificant. The memory returned with uncomfortable clarity. He remembered her expression after his remark. Not anger, not resentment, disappointment. The realization troubled him more than he expected. Years earlier, he had judged her within seconds. He had assumed that appearance reflected value. The conclusion now seemed embarrassingly shallow. Yet despite his growing regret, life continued moving forward. Another winter approached. Heavy snowfall arrived earlier than expected, creating challenges throughout the region. Concerned merchants proposed organizing a grand winter festival designed to stimulate trade, attract visitors, and strengthen economic activity before conditions worsened. The event quickly gained support. Nobles contributed funding. Businesses prepared exhibitions. Local governments coordinated logistics. As the largest landowner in the region, Duke James agreed to host the festival on estate grounds. Preparations consumed months. When opening day finally arrived, thousands gathered despite the cold. Colorful decorations lined the streets. Market stalls displayed goods from across the kingdom. Musicians performed festive melodies while merchants negotiated profitable deals. James moved through the event performing his duties as host. Although outwardly composed, he found little enjoyment in the celebrations. Then unexpected commotion erupted near the entrance. Several distinguished guests had arrived simultaneously. Curious murmurs spread through the crowd. A luxurious carriage rolled to a stop. Its elegant design suggested someone of considerable importance. Observers immediately speculated about foreign aristocrats or wealthy investors. James glanced toward the arrival with only mild interest. The carriage door opened. A woman stepped onto the snow-covered path. For a moment, the surrounding noise seemed to fade. She was not dressed extravagantly. Her clothing reflected sophistication rather than excess. Confidence accompanied every movement. Years of experience and accomplishment had created a quiet authority impossible to ignore. James recognized her instantly. The realization struck him with surprising force. She looked different yet unmistakably familiar. Not because beauty had transformed her. Because purpose had. The uncertain young woman from the ballroom had become someone entirely self-assured. Before James could approach, local officials surrounded her. Merchants greeted her enthusiastically. Community leaders sought her opinion regarding development projects. Several prominent guests spoke of her achievements with visible respect. Responded to each conversation with warmth and professionalism. No arrogance appeared in her behavior. Success had elevated her circumstances without changing her character. Watching from a distance, James experienced an unfamiliar sensation. Admiration. Not for wealth. Not for status. for the person she had chosen to become. Eventually, their paths crossed near one of the festival pavilions. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Snowflakes drifted gently between them. James understood that he owed her something long overdue. Drawing a slow breath, he met her eyes. He said quietly, "There is something I should have said years ago. I was wrong. I judged you unfairly, and I regret it." The apology felt inadequate compared to the memory it addressed. Studied him carefully. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. It was neither mocking nor triumphant. Merely sincere. "The past is the past, Your Grace," she replied. "What matters is what people choose to become afterward." Her words contained neither bitterness nor accusation. That simple grace affected him more profoundly than any condemnation could have. As she continued through the festival, greeting guests and discussing plans for future projects, James remained standing in the falling snow, watching her disappear into the crowd. For the first time in many years, he found himself wanting to know someone not because of what they possessed, but because of who they truly were. And though neither of them realized it yet, that winter reunion was only the beginning of a story neither had expected to write together. The winter festival ended, but its impact lingered long afterward. For Duke James, the reunion with unsettled assumptions he had carried for years. He had spent much of his adult life believing that trust invited disappointment and that emotional distance offered protection. Yet every interaction with challenged those beliefs. She neither sought his favor nor feared his title. She treated him with the same respectful honesty she offered everyone else. In the months that followed, their paths crossed frequently. Regional leaders often invited both of them to planning meetings concerning village development. James possessed resources and authority, while contributed practical expertise and an understanding of ordinary people's struggles. Together, they solved problems more effectively than either could alone. At first, their relationship remained strictly professional. They discussed transportation routes, agricultural improvements, and strategies for supporting vulnerable communities during winter. Yet beneath those conversations, something gradually changed. James began looking forward to their meetings. He admired how carefully listened before offering solutions. He admired her patience when disagreements arose. Most of all, he admired her refusal to let success change her values. Noticed changes in him as well. The arrogant nobleman she remembered from the ballroom seemed increasingly distant from the man she now knew. He listened more than he spoke. He accepted criticism without anger. He invested resources into projects that would never increase his wealth but would improve countless lives. Even so, a barrier remained between them. Could forgive the past, but forgetting proved more difficult. Whenever their conversations became personal, memories of that humiliating evening resurfaced. She questioned whether James truly valued her for who she was or whether admiration had arrived only after her achievements became impossible to ignore. The uncertainty troubled her. James sensed her hesitation but never pressured her. Instead, he focused on becoming the kind of man worthy of trust. Months passed. As another winter approached, weather forecasts grew increasingly alarming. Experienced farmers predicted unusually severe conditions. Merchants warned that supply routes might become impassable. Village leaders began stockpiling food and fuel in preparation for possible emergencies. Immediately organized preventative measures. Using knowledge gained through years of planning, she coordinated storage systems throughout the region. Additional supplies were distributed to isolated communities. Emergency shelters were prepared. Communication networks were strengthened. James committed significant estate resources to support the effort. Despite their preparations, nature proved more powerful than anyone anticipated. The storm arrived during the first week of winter. Dark clouds consumed the horizon. Violent winds swept across the countryside. Snow fell relentlessly, transforming roads into impassable barriers. Visibility disappeared. Entire villages became isolated within hours. Messages soon began arriving at the estate. Families were trapped. Supplies were running low. Several remote communities faced immediate danger. Understood the severity of the situation immediately. Waiting for conditions to improve could cost lives. Without hesitation, she organized rescue teams. James joined her. Many advisors argued against it. As Duke, his safety carried political importance. They insisted that others could lead the operation. James ignored every objection. People were suffering. Titles meant little if they prevented him from helping. Together, he and coordinated relief efforts from dawn until late into the night. Teams delivered food, medical supplies, and fuel wherever conditions allowed. Exhaustion became constant, sleep became scarce. Yet the crisis continued worsening. 3 days into the storm, urgent news arrived from a remote mountain village. Several families had become trapped after heavy snowfall collapsed portions of their homes. Rescue teams attempting to reach them had failed. Time was running out. Studied the reports carefully. If we wait much longer, they may not survive, she said. James nodded. Then we go ourselves. Within the hour, they departed with a small rescue group. The journey was brutal. Freezing winds struck with relentless force. Snow reached dangerous depths. Progress that normally required hours consumed nearly an entire day. When they finally reached the village, the situation proved worse than expected. Several buildings had partially collapsed beneath accumulated snow. Families were sheltering wherever space remained available. Children shivered despite blankets and firewood. Immediately, rescue efforts began. James worked alongside laborers, clearing debris and carrying supplies. No one received special treatment. No task was beneath him. Moved among frightened families, offering reassurance while organizing evacuations. Hours passed. Gradually, conditions improved. Then disaster struck. A weakened structure collapsed unexpectedly while several villagers remained trapped inside. Without hesitation, James rushed forward. Ignoring shouted warnings, he entered the unstable building. Moments later, another section gave way. The trapped villagers were rescued. James was not. Panic spread instantly. Rescuers dug frantically through snow and debris. His heart pounded with terror unlike anything she had ever experienced. For one dreadful moment, she feared they were too late. Then someone shouted. They found him. James was unconscious but alive. Relief nearly overwhelmed her. The return journey felt endless. Back at the estate, physicians worked through the night treating injuries and exposure. Although they expected recovery, the following hours remained critical. Refused to leave. She sat beside his bed while snow continued falling beyond the windows. In the quiet darkness, she reflected upon everything that had changed. Years earlier, she had viewed James as a symbol of arrogance and privilege. Now she saw the man who had risked his life to save strangers. The man who had chosen service over comfort. The man who had spent months proving that people could change. Near dawn, James finally opened his eyes. Relief flooded through her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then he managed a faint smile. I suppose that rescue was not my best decision. Tears gathered in his eyes despite her attempt to hide them. It was reckless. Probably. Silence settled again. This time it felt different. Honest. Comfortable. James studied her expression before speaking softly. The greatest mistake of my life wasn't entering that building. She looked at him. It was judging you years ago. I saw your clothes and believed I understood your worth. I was wrong. I judged with my eyes instead of my heart. The words carried no excuses. Only truth. Realized she had been waiting to hear them far longer than she admitted. I know, she replied quietly. James seemed surprised. You do? She nodded. Because the man who said those words no longer exists. Emotion flickered across his face. For perhaps the first time in years, he allowed himself complete vulnerability. I love you. The confession hung between them. I don't expect forgiveness for the past. I certainly don't deserve your affection, but I couldn't remain silent any longer. Looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled through her tears. I stopped hating you years ago. Hope appeared in his eyes. She continued softly. I was only waiting to see whether your heart could truly change. The answer was enough. Weeks later, the storm finally ended. The region slowly recovered. Villages rebuilt damaged homes, trade resumed, families reunited. Throughout the recovery effort, stories spread of both's leadership and James's courage. Their partnership became a symbol of hope. By spring, flowers replaced snow across the countryside. One evening, James invited to attend a formal gathering at the same ballroom where they had first met years earlier. She accepted. As music filled the hall and guests watched in anticipation, James crossed the room and stopped before her. Then, in the very place where he had once humiliated her, he knelt. The ballroom fell silent. Will you give me the chance to spend the rest of my life proving how wrong I was? Tears filled his eyes. This time they came from happiness. Yes, she whispered. The answer was followed by applause, laughter, and celebration. Months later, beneath gently falling snow, they were married before villagers, nobles, friends, and family alike. The years of misunderstanding, growth, and redemption had led them to that moment. And as they stood together beneath the winter sky, hand in hand, both understood a simple truth. The greatest transformations are not those that change a person's circumstances. They are the ones that change a person's heart. And theirs would remain united for the rest of their long, joyful, and deeply cherished lives.